These are familiar stories, but we rarely hear any mention of Rosemary, the Kennedy sister who disappeared from public view in her 20s. All these years of being a passed-over footnote are about to come to an end though, thanks to a biopic starring Emma Stone, which plans to explore the unfortunate twists and turns of her life. So what's her story, you ask? I'll tell you, but first, warning, this will depress the hell out of you, so gird yourself or flee from here at once in search of a feel-good YouTube video of kittens and puppies being best friends. Don't say I didn't warn you. Rosemary as a baby, flanked by her older brothers Joe Jr. and John. Rosemary's entry into the world was as troubled as what came after it. The year was 1918. World War I was still raging and Spanish influenza was making its way around the world, killing millions. Because so many people in the Boston area needed care, the family physician wasn't able to immediately pay the Kennedys a house call to deliver Rosemary. The attending nurse, who was fully capable of delivering the baby, ordered Rose to keep her legs closed until the doctor arrived. When this didn't work, the nurse pushed the baby's head back into the birth canal and held it there for 2 hours. The effects of this decision only became clear as Rosemary grew older. Every infant milestone, crawling, standing, walking, speaking, arrived later than it should have. This delay continued at school. Teachers advised that she repeat kindergarten and then the first grade too. Rosemary, third from the right, and her siblings, Joe and Rose Kennedy, who both came from overachieving families, were known for placing high academic and physical expectations on their children, and they made no exception for Rosemary. Both parents believed that Rosemary could be cured through a combination of holding her to the same standard as her siblings, specialized education and experimental injections. Despite their best efforts, Rosemary would never advance intellectually past the 5th grade. Rosemary's First Communion, an event that wouldn't have been possible if the church had known about her condition. In the early 20th century, many elites were swept up in the eugenics movement, an ideology marked by a belief that some groups, immigrants, people of color, the poor and the disabled, had a bad gene, and should not be allowed to breed. The Catholic Church, which was a major part of the family's way of life, refused communion and confirmation to the disabled. If the Kennedys were to be honest about Rosemary's challenges, their friends and other influential people would blame them for passing along defective genes and their religion would shun them and their daughter, worried that the truth about Rosemary would sully the family reputation or complicate their political aspirations. Rosemary was sent away to various schools and her parents did their best to keep her condition a secret. No one was more frustrated by not being able to make her parents proud than Rosemary. Her desire to please them can be felt in letters to her father. I would do anything to make you so happy. I hate to disappoint you in any way. Come to see me very soon. I get very lonesome every day. Learning challenges and parental pressures aside, Rosemary was a very social, amiable person, known for her big smile. She loved fashion, swimming, and going out on the town. Her older brothers, Joe Jr. and John, would often accompany Rosemary to dances. They waltzed her around the ballrooms, brought her punch, stood with her and shared a quiet laugh, stayed with her so that she appeared not different at all. Despite this compassion for his sister, Joe Jr. would later become radicalized on a trip to Germany in 1934 and adopt less than tender attitudes towards undesirables, including people with disabilities. He wrote home to his father, Hitler has passed the sterilization law, which I think is a great thing. I don't know how the church feels about it, but it will do away with many of the disgusting specimens of men which inhabit this earth. His father seemed to agree in his reply, I think your conclusions are very sound. In 1938, FDR appointed Rosemary's father as ambassador to the United Kingdom. The entire family relocated and it wasn't long before Rosemary and her younger sister Kathleen were presented to the king and queen in a debutante coming out to high society. Despite only having 2 weeks to prepare, most women dedicated months. Rosemary aced all the customs she had been taught and, apart from a minor stumble in front of the royals, had a perfect evening of socializing and dancing with high-profile, eligible bachelors. British newspapers were enamored with Rosemary and her dress, and favored her greatly over her sister in their coverage of the events, much to the dismay of her mother. Rosemary, with her mother and sister Kathleen on the day of her presentation to the king and queen. As Rosemary settled into life abroad, her circumstances continued to improve. Her parents enrolled her in a Montessori school, which traded the competitive qualities of Rosemary's home life for a more reassuring, confidence-building approach. Rosemary flourished, academically and socially. Her lead educator wrote her parents that Rosemary had made remarkable progress, and that there had been a great change in her lately. After visiting her, Joe Sr. Agreed, she is happy, looks better than she ever did in her life, is not the slightest bit lonesome. Just as Rosemary was finally finding comfort and happiness, history intervened. Germany was getting more and more aggressive on the continent, and Rosemary had to first be moved out of London and then out of England entirely. Back in the States, Rosemary became more rebellious, her behavior more erratic. Every day there would be